This is the new e-tron GT, and in this video, we'll see what it can do. We're talking emotions. We're making the e-tron GT dance. We'll see how fast it accelerates. We're talking about charging. We're checking out the highway consumption and the assistance systems. And we're talking about colors, light, and design. Hey and welcome to this new video here at Car Jonas, and welcome to the first impression of the Audi RS e-tron GT Performance. The most performant vehicle Audi has ever put on the road, and significantly more performant than its predecessor. Just a small example, the S version of the new e-tron GT is now more than 100 kilowatt more powerful compared to the old RS model. And when you consider that there are now 3 versions, it means that this one has to have an extreme amount of power. And we'll find that out together today, but before that, feel free to subscribe to the channel for free. Costs you absolutely nothing, but really helps me a lot in preparing these kinds of videos for all of you. Just one click below the video, so feel free to click on it briefly. And now let's take a detailed look at the car. The new S e-tron GT starts at 126,000 euros. The RS starts at 147,000 euros, and for the upgraded RS Performance, you'll need roughly 13,000 euros more. The S version looks better than its predecessor, but visually differs mainly in the side skirt from the RS version, which then optionally has this camouflage carbon. What I find visually very cool, and overall, this extension noticeably broadens the vehicle's appearance sideways. There are still air intakes, but they are hidden behind, which makes the vehicle much more aggressive. Now visually, there's the laser light, optionally with matrix functionalities, which you can add digitally, and there is Audi, typically also the whole welcome animations. The vehicle looks extremely sporty. The optional carbon elements are glossy carbon in the series, and the wheels Audi has now equipped here in the top version with an additional hubcap, and behind it there is the optional ceramic system. And yes, you have probably seen enough of that on Instagram, but I will still show you the practical entry aid, because I think this way everyone who can afford this car can get in comfortably. And we'll stay inside where hardly anything has changed except for the new steering wheel. We'll take a look at that in a moment. Overall, everything has remained the same except for small details. For example, now there are seats with new decorative stitching here in the lounge version. There are so many exclusive versions, but even the basic version really impressed me in this fabric. Optionally, there are of course also massage features and ventilation available. Carbon fiber can be found in every conceivable place you can imagine. That then extends over the mirrors into this interior trim and is combined with parts of Dynamica, but of course also high gloss black elements. That will of course make quite a few people very happy. Even though the display looks very similar to the passenger display in the Q6, this particular one is a full 1.4 inches larger, because at 12.3 inches it is exactly the same size as in the previous e-tron GT. And otherwise nothing has changed hardware-wise either. It runs just as fast, or well, as slow as you knew it before. But for me it's fine. The route planning is also current, just as you need it. I can plan the route from my location to Vienna quite well here. I can also specify, for example, the maximum or minimum charge value at the charging station at the destination. And there are various online services like YouTube streaming, as well as news, and even Apple CarPlay along with Android Auto now work wirelessly. Directly here on the screen, it gets seamlessly integrated, and then you have quite convenient access. Recently included was an RS monitor, which displays the current temperature values of both the tires and the battery. This gives you a detailed and comprehensive overview of what's happening in your vehicle at any moment. Furthermore, there are the 3 additional driving modes available in the RS models. You can adjust 2 different variables, and then there's also the performance mode. Behind the wheel, unchanged, there's the Audi virtual cockpit, and overall is one really well integrated, has a nice overview, and then there are the new buttons on the steering wheel, because the standard steering wheel looks like this. And in the RS variant, you've got boost and an RS button. Also, the second row of seats remains unchanged, meaning there's actually quite good space if you're traveling with 2 people here. I'm kind of wondering what the middle belt is for, because sitting back here in the middle is something I would not want to do for longer trips. But for example, there are also seat heaters outside, and also in the climate control here only for the rear area, and if it's too far back, you can really drive comfortably here. Of course, this glass roof that has been replaced with carbon still has something special, especially with these new switchable elements, which I find very, very cool. By the way, the glass roof is standard while carbon is optional. The interior becomes very, very dark, but you sit really comfortably here, even in the back. It's sporty, and you can also ride along for a few meters here. And with that, the only thing left in the roundup is the rear, which we'll look at briefly because everything in the upper part has stayed the same. The Audi light signature is identical to the previous version, but there was no need to change it because it always looked very good. And in my opinion, the e-tron has the most stylish rear end of all electric cars currently on the market. The lower section was then adjusted because just like earlier, there is also a deliberate distinction here between RS and non-RS models, and you can also choose between normal carbon and carbon camouflage if you want that optionally in the performance version. Especially this center section with the reflector and the significantly more pronounced diffuser elements make the vehicle even sportier. The S version comes with the same diffuser that we knew from before. The trunk remains unchanged and it's relatively deep and wide, but not excessively tall, and it finishes in a relatively steep angle. But you can see here, we managed to pack all our equipment, a few suitcases, and even backpacks in, and in the lower area, there's still some space where, with a bit of effort, you can even fold in the energy kick with all its various adapters, so you can charge quite comfortably wherever you are while on the go. And even if it gets tight in the back with the energy kick, you'll have plenty of room up front. For example, my carry-on suitcase fits in there easily. So Audi really has a really pleasant sound, even though there isn't much space under the regular loading area at the back. But actually, I'm always quite impressed with the spacious storage volume inside, especially given the overall performance and the type of car. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and now we'll focus on the driving experience. And where better to do that than here in the Frankfurt area, in the Brombachtal, where there are really some nice winding roads. Because the new active suspension system is supposed to intentionally lean the vehicle into curves. And I'd say it does it pretty well, or more accurately, leaning into the curves. Because if I accelerate here now, the car almost counteracts it, and you're essentially driving as if on rails. But this feature is entirely optional, meaning that by default, you will receive a standard air suspension system in the e-tron GT. This advanced suspension system is available for an additional cost. It costs approximately 7,000 euros, so it's definitely special but really fun to use. And right now we're actually just in the comfort mode, and we haven't even switched to the RS mode yet because I have new buttons on the steering wheel and can use them to switch either to the two RS modes or then to the performance mode. And it's really ramping up there, so this one really packs a punch here. The active suspension doesn't work like it does in comfort mode. Instead, it's tuned more sportily. But driving through such winding roads here, that's really enjoyable. And at no moment did I get the impression that the car would lose its stability, like it would slide out or anything, not knowing where to turn. And that's genuinely at sports car level. Well, I've never had the experience of driving an R8, but I really can't imagine it being sportier or more agile than this thing right here. What really stands out on these especially curvy and hilly types of roads is that the car just coasts and glides along extremely well. Sure, with electric cars, you always pay close attention to good regeneration, and this car does it really properly. The adaptive recuperation, which we're used to from Audi, is of course also present here in the latest generation of the e-tron GT. But above all, the extremely effortless coasting and thus smoothly gliding along, which many, especially those who enjoy sporty driving, appreciate, is present in this vehicle. And you always have to say the switch from any other sporty combustion engine to this electric car here, when I don't have to completely adapt, don't have to completely think about recuperation all of a sudden. It's obviously easier if the car can do both well. The only thing that's missing is the one-pedal driving. Audi has now introduced this with the Q6. This is still missing here. The driving dynamics here on such a country road are, of course, one thing, but it's different when you can try it out on a test track. We are currently here at the former Opel test track to fully explore and discover the true capabilities of the new Audi suspension system, specifically in various cornering situations. This means I can go through the curves here at 80, but with the limiter set relatively relaxed in the slalom, because in comfort mode, the active suspension compensates. This means I can tilt the vehicle by 2 degrees from right to left, and in doing so, ensure that I can navigate the curve while maintaining a speed of 80. This allows for better stability and control. really relatively even ride. That's really cool. This is made possible by Audi's own active suspension system, which consists of 4 different hydraulic pumps, each attached to one damper, to selectively lift or lower the vehicle and thus actively shape the driving dynamics during cornering maneuvers as well as during braking processes, enhancing both performance and comfort. The whole system is always optional, available for an extra €7,000, and here Audi can use a tech demo to demonstrate just how fast and agile it actually works in place. However, the car can't do all those dance moves at your home. This is just for demo purposes, and because it is an RS model, I'll press the G button for performance again and see how the suspension performs as I go through here. It's genuinely crazy how well you can hold this thing. He's steering a lot more now. We're at 100 kilometers per hour. But it's performant and fun. Just the 0 to 100 time. How fast is the car now from 0 to 100? Audi claims it can do it in 2.5 seconds. So let's go ahead and give it a shot, switching to performance mode, foot on the brake and on the gas pedal simultaneously. Launch control activated. I'm zooming in big and hitting the gas. And now at a speed of 115, he just slams it into second gear once more. 0 to 100 in 2.5 seconds flat. What Audi says. We've driven here a few more times now. Sometimes it was at 2.5, sometimes at 2.6. And when I drove without launch control, like here, just a standstill, brake in, there without launch control, just a flick, it also pushes you right into the seat. And then it was 2.8 seconds, so 0.3 seconds difference between launch control and no launch control. But now let's move on to the highway, the area where you'll probably see the car most often. Because even though it's fun to drive on winding country roads, let's be honest here, someone who buys an e-tron GT or a Porsche Taycan is looking to cover long distances with their car, or at least drive shorter stretches in a sporty and spirited manner once in a while. And we're doing exactly the opposite right now because we're currently driving at a steady 130, testing the assistance systems a bit to see if there's been any improvement, since that's important in this context. We can give you an update at the charging station about our energy consumption. Here at a constant 80 miles per hour, depending on the driving conditions, the car, especially here in comfort mode, is incredibly fun because you can really feel the significant difference the active suspension makes here on the highway. On one hand, it means he cushions extremely well, absorbing a lot of bumps effectively. And it's really important to emphasize that the balance struck between sportiness and being comfortable is exceptionally well achieved. And whenever you happen to encounter a curve on the highway, the car tilts slightly in the opposite direction. And that results in you arriving feeling super relaxed and calm without the sensation that it's pushing you out of the curve and making you feel like you need to counter steer. Well, I can almost completely rely on the car here. And that also applies to the assistance systems because they do a good job, meaning they really keep things very consistently, keeps the lane and also maintains a good distance from the car in front. The only issue a little bit that I have is that features you now know from other Audi models. You won't get here. This essentially means you'll be looking in vain for an active lane change assistant or an AR head-up display. It's simply a driver-focused car, and the vehicle truly makes you feel that experience as well. Sure, it's built on a different platform than all the new cars, like an MEB platform, like a PPE platform. But when you have a direct comparison and maybe have sat in a Q6 before, or now an A6 e-tron, then it's a whole different ball game here. But for that, you're practically sitting on the ground having a blast. If necessary, you can hit the boost button and really shoot out of there. Now we're talking on the way to the charger about the consumption values, as at a steady 130 kilometers per hour, we had a consumption of around 29 kilowatt hours. So when you had a mix of maybe a construction site, maybe a bit of traffic, we were at about 26 kilowatt for the last 80 kilometers. And honestly, that's too much for me. Because if you compare it, I mean, I have to measure the car against a Tesla Model S Plaid, for example, which typically drives well under 20 kilowatt in everyday use at 130 km/h. Then I don't understand the justification for having so much more consumption. Feel free to comment on what you think. To me, it's a point of criticism because, sure, I can press here anytime, and even as the driver, I get startled. What the car can briefly unleash in terms of power at the top end, but I don't do that when I'm driving at 130. That means this constant driving should actually be more economical. Earlier, we arrived with only 6% battery after this longer drive at 130 kilometers per hour. Now we've been here for 17 minutes and 10 seconds. Back to 80%. And it wasn't from 6 to 80%, but rather from 10 to 80%, because I carefully timed it to actually provide you with an accurate value. So it takes 1 more minute if you go from 6 to 80. And that is a really, really good value. Because if you consider that Audi claims the vehicle itself charges from 10 to 80 in 18 minutes, and we were almost a minute faster during the very first charging check, then that's remarkable. The car maintains an extremely long charging curve of over 300 kilodollars, then at some point drops to 200, and even now here at 87% help, we're still at 71 kilodollars. Humans always sneak in, and that's a good tip, so be sure to check out our podcast. Or I'll link you to the video where I chat and discuss various aspects regarding mobility with Tarek. In his video, we also explored my car and the e-tron S while Tarek's car was charging again. It's really impressive, managing about 80 kilowatt hours in just 17 minutes. Nowadays, there are ambitious claims like a smart #5, which can apparently charge in a quick 15 minutes, thanks to an astounding 400 kilowatts. Charging performance, trying to achieve that with a similarly sized battery, but here you can already see it. You can hear how the fan is whirring. We just recorded that while it's charging. And that is really extremely loud, so the car can charge using DC. The e-tron GT charges with AC, optionally with up to 22 kilowatts, which means just grab the energy kick or of course the charging cable and plug it right in. And the really cool thing about the energy kick is, no matter where you are, whether it's a regular wall box or just a CE16 socket, you can simply use it. And also use it as a charging cable. Or you can use it at home for solar PV charging, or if you are a company car driver, to accordingly be able to offset your incurred expenses in return. The energy kick makes it super easy and simple. I always like that a lot. And now we can effortlessly charge the car overnight at the hotel or virtually anywhere there's electricity available. As I said, optionally only 22 kW, standard with 11 kW, but it's really an option I would recommend to everyone. And the cool thing is, as you can see, I plugged in from the left and we charge DC from the right, so this simultaneous charging is still possible. I believe it will still take quite a bit of time before I can eventually park an RS e-tron GT Performance in front of my own house and not just spend one night sleeping in a hotel room with the car. Very long? Still, it's super exciting to see what Audi has done with the e-tron GT because it was already performing well. It was a lot of fun and looked cool. And here they really take it up a notch. I am quite impressed with the car. It was an absolute blast to spend those 2 days out and about with it. Now I'm super excited to hear your feedback in the comments. Do you think that Audi might be getting too close to the Porsche Taycan with this model? Or do you feel it's perfectly fine and completely acceptable that these cars are as comparable as they are? Honestly, there's really not much difference anymore, also in terms of price. But of course, that's another topic. If you want to see how we did last time with the e-tron GT on the long haul, then check it out up there. And down here, you can subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet.